the one thing that's still most important, that's still the outlier to those that most companies will fall back or not have, it's knowledge of your product and your market. Those are the two like most complex, I think, because I think as founders, earlier stage companies that we work with, it's, hey, we built this for this reason, it solves this problem. But if you haven't gone to your end customers, you don't know if that's the primary value proposition they see for it.
Welcome to Cold to Close, the show about what actually happens between a cold touch and a closed deal. I'm Jeremy Schiff, CEO of SalesBot, and I talk to the people building real pipeline today, founders, revenue leaders, and go-to-market operators. Today, I'm joined with Kevin Warner, founder and CEO of Leadium and an outbound sales leader who's helped teams build predictable pipeline through structured systems. Kevin's work across multiple companies and seen firsthand what separates outbound teams that scale from ones who stall. So excited to get into it. Kevin, great to have you here today.
Always a pleasure. Great to speak with you again.
Likewise. So obviously you and I are quite familiar with each other, but can you, for the audience, give a little bit background about who you are and what your background is and what you're focused on?
Yeah, of course. Founder of Leadium since 2015. So going on over a decade now here at Leadium. Prior to that, kind of followed the tech circuit in multiple positions, everything from Y Combinator, business development, doing sales development at another tech company out of New York. From that 2011, 13, 15 era kind of that was one of the best moments of tech, I think, in the San Francisco era. Kind of got roots in all these different customer success, business development, product development as well at a few different tech companies. Realized as I was kind of pursuing what's next, as we all kind of do in our careers, nothing really works without sales. And so that kind of brought me to the sales side. You can build an amazing product. I'd say one of my first tech companies that I worked with, we took a company from the ASX in Australia to NASDAQ, raised $30 million, went belly up, never made $1 of revenue. So you very quickly realize no matter how good a product is, it's not great without sales. So that's what led us to the creation of Leadium, which was at the time in that 2014-15 era where sales development really started to get its roots as you started to see outreach and sales loft started to come in. Apollo was just kind of figuring out where they were going to play. Discover Org was being, the Discover Org and ZoomInfo acquisition was just going through around that same period. And that's when we started Leadium.
Love it. Makes a lot of sense. So definitely a lot has changed from those days to now. So dovetails into literally my first question, which is you've been building Leadium for quite a while and running, helping build outbound teams for very different types of industries and areas. What have you seen change the most in outbound in the last couple of, I was going to say the last couple of years, but I feel like at this point I should be asking the last couple of months.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think to date, over 10 years, we've worked with over 1,500 businesses, everything from the enterprise of the Microsofts of the world down to mom and pop. As time goes on, it's interesting because I think we all live in this bubble of LinkedIn and you need this or you need that in order to make outbound work. And you're constantly being sold like the latest snake oil in some way or another. I think where technology has really advanced, especially in the last few years, is helping facilitate the activity you're doing, maybe help measure the activity you're doing. But outbound is still rooted in, can you place a cold call? Can you send a personalized email? Not can you send 10,000 emails over a 1-month period where you try to use AI to make it relative? Can you add the human element into an email? Same with LinkedIn. Can you build that connection with LinkedIn? Don't try to build it with the hopes that you're going to score on day one an appointment of that relationship, but how do you build this long tail pipeline that maybe doesn't produce in the first 1 or 2 or 3 months? It really takes time to start that momentum of outbound and see what's working, see what's not, build those relationships. But as time goes on, it really starts to develop. So as technologies really help facilitate the activity and measure it, at the same time, outbound's only as successful as the sales team you have running it, which is still rooted in a lot of cold calling, a lot of manual email work. And that's funny enough what a lot of companies are trying to get rid of, but the companies that have it are those that are still winning.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's been very interesting to see people who are trying to automate away everything are finding that they're sort of shouting into the wind, right? They're generating a lot of content, but ultimately what matters is, are you driving meetings? And most importantly, meetings that matter, right? So when outbound is working.
I don't mean to cut you off. I think one of the best examples of that automating everything and it not necessarily working, you could see it modeled out in other industries. I think if you use home sales as an example, I think we all say, hey, why do we still use real estate agents? Zillow could just add a buy now button. In a lot of senses, they do have a buy now button, but the buyer still wants that salesperson to walk them through. What do I not know? How could this be a good fit for me or a bad fit for me? Obviously, there's other companies in the real estate side who try to automate the purchasing experience, but where sales is still so human, and that's the one aspect that you can't automate. You can make your job easier or more effective, but automating everything, that's the losing strategy in a lot of outbound we see today.
Yeah, it makes sense. So, and when we're talking about areas where there's opportunity, right? So I'm just sort of curious, like, because I've sort of speaking to people all the time about targeting, data quality, messaging, sort of all sorts of different things that might sort of influence things. Which areas do you think are sort of driving the most impact in your ability to get meetings going with interesting companies that you might want to sell to on behalf of your clients?
Here, I think what you started mentioning, all incredibly important, right? You have to have great quality data. If you have a human research team, I say you're limited in outbound by the time it takes somebody to do something. If you have an SDR who can place 100 cold calls or 50 cold calls, that's all you get. And if you factor in connect rates, even if you're using technology to get 20 or 30% connect rates, you're still limited by the time factor. So better data makes that time more effective. Better messaging makes the time that data came through. Technology is helping facilitate that. I would say the one thing that's still most important, that's still the outlier to those that most companies will fall back or not have, it's knowledge of your product and your market. Those are the two like most complex, I think, because I think as founders, earlier stage companies that we work with, it's, hey, we built this for this reason, it solves this problem. But if you haven't gone to your end customers, you don't know if that's the primary value proposition they see for it. I liken it to, you're a developer, you created a cool, navigation inside of your product, only to find out that, oh, your users don't actually use it. So then you saw a lot of tech companies come about that show you where your users use your product and how they use your product, and what you're building actually isn't being used the way you want it. That's the same in sales. I think earlier stage, they don't know enough about their market, how to position it. Other companies might know a lot about their market, but they don't know outbound. You don't know your conversion rates. It's the first time you're executing it. You can't just expect appointments to come. You don't know. It is an acquisition channel. Like every acquisition channel, every segment of your market converts differently. So you need to run outbound to learn, hey, is this channel effective? How effective is it in different segments? How do we change how we position ourselves to those different segments? And then not only with appointment setting, the appointments that are set, do they convert into revenue? So even if we have a high converting outbound program for this vertical or this industry, it might not convert to close won deals at the same rate, a less effective outbound. So there's a lot of analytics that go into outbound to determine, hey, is the effort we're doing actually worthwhile? That's that time component that takes months and months and is outside of just quality data. Of course, to get to that conclusion, I need good tech that runs good analytics, that has good data, that's fueling it all. But again, that's why it's more complex than just, how do I get my next appointment?
Makes sense. And yeah, so double click on one of those things. You talked about better data, right? Which everyone always says, like, you need better data. But I find that means like really different things to different sort of people, right? So just to throw out a couple different concepts, it could mean I just want to make sure that whatever database I'm using to go and find people, I have everyone that's in that sort of TAM of who I want to go and talk to. It could mean I want that data to be really up to date and like making sure that I'm not engaging with people that have switched jobs and I can't even like sell them the product or service because they're not doing that anymore. It could mean um, the comprehensiveness of data. So I want to understand all of these different attributes about people or companies or other sort of metadata that I wouldn't. And then it could just literally means often it's funny, people use data and targeting almost interchangeably, but like part of it is also to your point, if I'm going to go and segment down to find specific niches and go after them, I really need to qualify who I should be talking to for segment one versus segment two. So I know that my messaging and everything downstream is going to resonate. When you're thinking about that pool of things, I'm just sort of curious, when you say good data, is one of those sort of an attribute that's more primal in that, or are they all sort of equal? Like, how do you sort of like rank order those sort of concepts?
Yeah, I think I rank order them. One, the more specific you can get with data, the more valuable it is. If I know this exact market that has these buyer signals that do this, convert at this rate with this message, I can now get into this like math of sale, or how do I repeat this repeatable pipeline, which I hate anyway because nothing's repeatable. Like the market's going to change with one presidential announcement. We're going to get to holiday season, that's going to tank everything. Interest rates will go up and now less people are buying. Like, so nothing is really repeatable. That's why you're playing these like 3-month 6-month kind of sprints. The more specific you can get with data around the markets you already know, this is only helping, because again, that's what's going to fuel your SDR motion and that human element of selling. And anytime I can get my seller better qualified data on exactly who we need to convert and how we need to convert them, better. It is in cycles, though, I found, with how mature a company is with their pipeline, with their calculations, with their runway, with what they're willing to give outbound. Because with that more specific segmented, best data that you could possibly get, it oftentimes run more expensive. And if I don't know, and now you're getting into a cost factor. So where I say, hey, it takes time for this to evolve in outbound, to learn, to optimize, to adjust. If you're using all the best data, number one, that's fantastic, but it better hit on day one because your cost is going to go up. And now if it doesn't work and appointments aren't being set, you start to see that sales blame game. Well, is it the SDR who's not converting enough? We're giving him great data. Or is it the data is not good enough? Is it the wrong data? And you don't actually know what's working, what's not working. And it's because you didn't set the foundation of building that outbound motion. Once you know what you know with outbound and what messaging to who and how it converts and how to have those conversations, that's when you really want to say, okay, we can increase data costs to X degree, because if we do, our SDR is going to say the exact thing they need to, because they're already kind of trained. They already have the talk scripts. They have every objection battle card for this scenario. They've been on the team for 8 months. This isn't a new hire that we're spending good data costs for. So you, of course, want a more robust profile of your buyer. But that's not to say you need it on day one. I think on day one, the exercise is that we often have, just draw the line in the sand. If I say, Jeremy, today you have to place 50 cold calls or 100 cold calls. And yes, I understand that you can target 20 different industries, from healthcare to automotive to aerospace, and you're targeting, 5 different decision makers within those companies because you solve problems for each of them. But today you only get to call 100 people. Who's it going to be? Draw the line in the sand. And if you say, hey, I don't know which industry is going to convert better, so now you have to go into it with a more strategic plan. And again, the more you can funnel better targeted data on top of that, it can only help.
Makes sense. Very interesting. And how do you think about like that whole, like, do you think about it sort of more piecemeal or holistically? So you sort of made this point of like, well, there's the cost of the SDR, and the SDR time is finite to go and execute on the calls. There's the cost of the data. There's the cost of the systems for the automation. Like, are you literally thinking about like cost per like booked meeting? Like, what is your like internal key benchmark that you're using to work out when I should move to a more expensive data provider, or where that trade-off will sort of provide value versus where it's just going to be noise and isn't going to have sort of the lift we're hoping for?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing when it comes to building outbound programs. And you got to remember, I'm in the outsource that SDR function world, and a lot of players in our space. And the reason it's got a good light in some people's eyes and a bad light in other people's eyes, there's too many agencies that are pushing, hey, just focus on appointments, because as business owners, that's what you want. I want revenue. Appointments equals revenue, but that's not true. Bad appointments are a waste of time. So just because someone agreed to an appointment doesn't mean that it's qualified, that there's any chance of a sale. So if your SDR team is incentivized in the wrong way, just to book meetings that are unqualified, who does that help? I'd rather have a higher close rate with fewer appointments than a lower close rate with more or less qualified appointments. So that's kind of what we're preaching. And so that brings in to that kind of framework on, hey, we have to have quality data to kind of fuel all of this. We don't focus on cost per lead at all. I hate the idea of, hey, this is all, because there's so many costs that go into outbound. I think of it as any business owner that's starting an outbound program. There are multiple things you need to make outbound work. You need a VP of sales development. You need someone who understands outbound, the mechanics, the analytics, the targeting multiple segments, just like on the digital side, where there's all these analytics and different campaigns and different pieces of creative for different aspects of your market, you have that in outbound. So you need the VP of sales development. You need good data. That's that next most important. Once we have the strategy, where's the data coming from? Where do we get the best data at the right price? That right price changes based on company maturity. If you have a larger budget, if you have a higher ACV, if you can spend more for the foundation, then that makes it easier. If you're an earlier stage company where it's, hey, we're already, we have a 3-month or a 6-month runway, I can't afford more data because I don't even know if it's going to work yet. So the unknown of, is this going to work, is still that, well, we have to kind of cut costs somewhere. We can still get good data, direct dial data on a section of your market, especially if you have a broad market. It makes it a little bit easier. And then you still need messaging. You still need the right tech, which tech today is expensive if you're going with the right tech. If you think of the Sales Lofts or Apollo for that sales engagement platform, of course, you have the cheaper options in the instant leads like that, but they're not going to give you the most robust enterprise grade analytics on multiple channels, etc. You need the Nooks or the Orem for a dialer. There's a million from Kixie. There's tons of dials that will compete. You still need the data side of it to fuel all of that motion. And then you still have to pay the SDR. So you're factoring in so many costs already. I think most organizations who don't know their conversion metrics yet for outbound, they're focused on appointments. Hey, I want the end result. Do the ends justify the means? That becomes the question, because, if I pay for better data, but then you don't get a close rate, whose fault is it if your sales reps don't close at the rate they should? So again, the more mature a company who understands all of those analytics of their pipeline are willing to spend more for data day one. The younger companies, it's one of those add-on costs that's a nice to have, but can we supplement it with maybe good data, but not as profiled as we need it to be? It's a complex, by the way, that changes from company to company to company, which makes it even harder.
Yeah, very interesting. It sort of sounds like there's no right answer, as you might expect. Different tools and different data products for different outbound motions. Makes a lot of sense. Kevin, thanks for your time. I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but unfortunately, we just have a sort of shorter format in the moment. But I may, at this point, maybe I'll have to expand that over time. But that's a wrap for Cold to Closed. Big thanks to Kevin Werner for breaking down what's actually driving outbound performance right now. If you got something out of this, please share it with your team and follow along for more conversations like this. See you on the next time. Bye.